Hi.
Howdy, Paula. I like the short hair. It's looking good.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just a mess right now, but yeah, it looks good. It looks good when it's better.
No, I like the way it frames your face. It's nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, gang. Welcome
Look at
back.
all.
Got not me on the screen. I've got the board. I finally got a chance to do a little bit of organizing on the board. It's still not done, but it's getting there. It's getting close to full. How is everyone's summer going? Yeah, Paula, you've been dealing with the fires. Is there still a lot of ramifications or
No other products.
Oh, it's great. What the hell? I just shut my TV off and
turned on you?
yeah.
Ghost machine?
Oh, it's the update. I have it on Apple.
Oh,
and
got
there's a
it.
new, yeah, you have to press a different, oh, forget it. Yeah, no, there's a lot of problems. A lot of problems.
Are you having supply chain problems as a result of the fires too, or is it
Um,
really
I'm
isolated?
not. Lahaina, you know, they want to open it up. Not the government wants to open it up.
Yeah,
The mayor and the governor and the Hawaiians are not going to be very pleasant to the people that are visiting.
yeah,
So they better stay out of Lahaina. They can go
yeah,
anywhere else on Maui they want to go. They can come to Kihei. They can go to Wailea. They can go up country. They can go to Kanapali. They can go to Kapalua. But
yeah.
don't go to Lahaina. They're gonna be
Look,
very nasty.
yeah, no need for tragedy tours. That's
That's right.
not right. Yeah. How about the volcano? Is that surprising impact or is it just happening because it does?
That's on the Big Island.
Yeah,
So that
doesn't.
unless the winds are blowing
Okay,
from the south, it doesn't bother us here.
got it. Okay.
And it's gone down. The unless it's popped back up again in the last day, it's like quieted down. So
Got it. Man,
yeah,
exciting times we live in. How's everybody
yeah.
else doing?
Paula,
Anybody?
where are you?
I'm on Maui.
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah.
I
Wow,
hope everybody
stressful.
else's weather is remaining as relatively sane as we get these days.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just we're not getting any rain and it's not getting any greener.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And the winds are high and whatever. And some idiot, all they have to do is throw a cigarette out from their car, and that's
that'll
not
go.
what caused the other one, but
Yeah,
it happens all the time.
yeah, we've been
So
having a lot of that in Oregon too, as the multiple fires that raged for weeks and weeks.
yeah.
But yikes. All right, well, on to more hopefully cheerful things today. I say with trepidation, since we're working on the
Hello,
Emerald.
everyone. Hello.
So we're gonna succeed in this emerald cut today. I have strong feelings about this. That's what we're gonna
Okay.
do. I did
All
not.
right.
Yeah, we're gonna make it happen. I did not get the time to practice, so we're gonna make it happen anyhow. I did get a little time to put the board together into more finished shape. It's still not got everything we've done, but here's where we're looking. I'm trying to think what the best angle is for me. I'm gonna move the camera a little bit just to try and get you guys a more complete view. So this is what we've been working on, gang. For
That's
a year and a half.
beautiful.
It's kind of impressive. Yeah, there's about
Yeah.
6 or 8 settings missing from this. I haven't got the tension setting put on, and I have a couple that are in our to be repaired, and I've got a couple that I think I must have reused the stone or something, and I've managed to lose track. So I've got to either dig through all of my junk piles and see where they are, or remake them. But this is the spot we're hoping to fill today, is the emerald facet. I didn't even ever get the tape taken off of it because I didn't have one finished that I liked. So we got a lot. One of the other ones that we didn't try, but you guys had asked me to put back on the queue is a slotted cut card for a faceted stone. We only did for the cabochon, so that'll come in another session. And then I think I wanted to redo the tension settings because I didn't like the outcomes that I'd gotten. And then there was a request for a special cut, a fancy cut. And I think that'll be it, gang. I don't think I'm missing any that were requested. But broadly speaking, that's what we've got. I'm going to give my usual pitch. Tonight is the last night to register for the Bezel's Less Ordinary workshop if you want to attend. Otherwise, I'm closing down registration after tonight. That is for, is it next weekend? No, the weekend after next. There's still space in the clasps class. So the Bezel's Less Ordinary is Friday the 29th, 30th, and October 1st. Holy cow, it's October already. And then the Bezel's Less Ordinary is out in November. And that is November 17th, 18th, and 19th. Excuse me, that's the clasps class is November. And that is, I gotta say, one of my favorite to teach. We're gonna learn boatloads. That's a fire hose of clasp information, more than you will want in one weekend. But you'll pick and choose the clasps that you like. Were there any of the settings that anybody wanted to take a look at up close and personal before I move away from the board to the work this time? Nothing?
I think you need to pin yourself, Rachel.
Oh, thank you. I always forget that. That's why it's so small for you guys. Spotlight for everyone. There we go.
Oh, yes. Now I can see it.
Rachel, is there any way to take your phone and put it on each one of those settings and go down the row?
So if you can stand the wobble, I can take the good camera and do it. Hang on a sec. Let me see if this is too much for you guys. I gotta take it out of its setting. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. Is that focus good?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
Let's see. If
could you crawl up on your desk for me, Rachel, please?
So there's where we started.
Slow.
Slow.
Slower. Okay.
And we went to some faceted step bezels, shoulder bezels. We did the triangle that I still want to do again because I got too tight of a fit. We got a
The
few
shoulder
different.
bezel.
Pardon?
The shoulder bezel. I'm gonna ask you a question later.
Sure. Oh, when later you're gonna ask me a question? Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna show you my piece because
Oh, got
for
it.
some
Okay.
reason I did it and now it doesn't fit.
Gotcha. Okay. So we did all the different shoulder bezels. There's a little example of some of the stuff we do when we do the fancier versions in Bezel's Less Ordinary. John talks about those in the book, but doesn't actually show the details. There's our square. This is our missing spot that we're going to fill today. And then we go to the next chapter. Oh, no. So we're still on step related bezel. So this is still chapter 3. The irregular bezel, where we're doing something that's abstract that we needed to fit it around. The hybrid, where we start to add prongs to our step bezels. Then we did heavy wall tubing. So that was straight drill into tubing versus nested tubing, where we soldered the inner line on the inside of it. We did those double bezel tube settings. We did some cup and bullet settings. I don't think we finished setting all of these. I think these are not terribly easy to do without gluing. Then we did our tongue shapes, which were the interesting challenge of getting enough of a bezel to not hide everything, but still cover enough to hold the piece. We did versions that were just capped and versions that had the domed cap that he describes. We did the conicals.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, the conicals are challenging, but they're fun. And you can make them into little dangles for the bottoms of your earrings. We did 2 versions. We did castellated and we did scalloped. Then we did the reverse bezel, and this one isn't setting terribly well without glue. I think I just need to reframe it a little bit to get it there, stretch it out a little bit. We did the reverse bearing bezel setting. That's the one where the jump ring is what holds it in from behind. And then we fold the bezel wall of the back over the jump ring to make it hold. There's the little doodads we made. Oops, that's I'm going down a row. That those little doodads are on the wrong row. We've got the teardrop briolette cap that we did. Here's a modified shoulder bezel, another one of the fancy versions that we can do. This one actually has two different sides, but my hands are full, so I can't show you the other side easily. Then we went on to chapter 4 with our prong settings. There's our fancy prong setting with the bottom detail where we cut it off at the bottom, filed it and put it back on. There's our basket settings. We did a 4-prong round. We did a 3-prong round. We did a 4-prong small basket using thinner wire and using his little technique of putting the tab on the back to give you something to grip when you're working on it. Then we branched out to the basket settings, which are pair, and we could have done all prongs, but he does a version of it where the front, the back of prongs and the front is the sheet metal, and I really like that look on a pair, so that's what we played with. Similarly, our basket for the marquee with the prongs over the top. And we played around in all of these, we played around with different cuts of how we were doing our prongs, but none so much as this cushion cut where we really branched out to the split prongs.
I like that.
Right. I don't know that we ever did the triangle basket, which is different than the trillion basket, but when I finish polishing up the trillion, that'll at least go there. We did successfully get a nice emerald basket. I think that one took 2 attempts as well, if I recall. And that one, we did the double corner prongs. Again, we could have done single prongs up the corner, but that double prong look really emphasizes the corners of the emerald in nice ways. We did a couple different versions of our slotted cut card. We did a bullet version and then a plain tab. And we are still going to do the slotted faceted stone. This is where those little devices in the copper in the back come into play. This is making the multiple prong sets at once. So this was doing 4 or 6 at a time between the rods of the silver, where you make the little grid and you run the wires through. Remember, in the book, John doesn't have that little extra block of tubing that I include. I found that helped me keep my wires straighter. We then did the square rod split prong with that teeny tiny little stone where all we're doing is cutting down the center of the square. You can do that in bigger shapes, but it gets really, really tricky to get the filing down of the prongs. They get a little sloppy. We did our stitch setting in chapter 5 when we moved on to graver setting. I don't think I did this one on screen. I think I did this another time on my own, but this was a version of the stitch setting with trillion cabs that I like. This is pushing the boundaries of how big you should go with this. This is not a setting that I would use on anything in active use, because those prongs, the stitches will fall off over time. Then we have a whole bunch of different versions on this one. So we've got some bead settings, both the 4 bead and then the wraparound beads on that one. We've got our star setting, which is a version of the bead setting. We've got our flush setting, and I have some other plates. This was my sampler of a little bit of everything, but I have some plates for each of those. We moved on to chapter 6 with the flush setting. Here was our finished ring with that Roman setting. This is the one we sent out for casting, and we did a lot of carving on one of our sessions, and I've just polished it up a bit and blackened it after we set it.
That's cool.
Yeah, it looks nice. Still not a ring that I would ever wear because it's way too bulky, and I would spend a lot more time finessing the wax before I put it out there. Then we did a square stones channel set with a batch of them, the false channel set. This is another example I had of how you can do a single channel set for the flush setting. I don't think I did that on screen. I think that I did that elsewhere. We went on to the beads, pearls, and gemstones. And these all kind of look like, you know, pearls on a stick, because that's pretty much what they are. But there are actually 3 variations. This is, we made the little cup for the back, and we put the post on it. Again, we'd either do a square or a twist wire post or a scratched up post that has something to grip. And then it is epoxied in place. This one was a straight post on flat sheet. There's a little bit of a curve to it, but it doesn't have the cup behind it. So same deal. And this one looks exactly like it's just the same thing as we did over here, but this is the one that we did the wedge post on. I don't know why. I must have been in a hurry to finish it that day because I would have polished up the metal beneath it because it's not easy to polish below, but that pearl ain't coming off of there. And then we haven't put out the tension setting ones, but we will. And these are just some of the bezels from the Bezels Less Ordinary class. Not all of them, just some of the examples. And I can't find the stone for that, which is a bummer because it's a really pretty sapphire. No ruby that I had for that final piece. So that's what we've got, with a few of them missing, sitting in my pile to be either polished or set in order.
Wow, wow.
Yep.
So impressive. Bravo.
Yep.
Yay!
You did that, Rachel. That's just fabulous.
It is,
Yes.
it's been a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
I would still love I'm gonna hold off until the end of this week, but I gotta send a note to John thanking him. I just saw in my Facebook feed a reminder that told me that Monday or Sunday was my 12th anniversary of taking my very first John Cogswell class. If you had asked me, I would have said it was 20 years ago. And I probably took 400 hours, give or take, of instruction with him in the years following. Like, I jammed in as many John Cogswell classes as I could. I took a lot of week-longs at Arrowmont and a couple other places. And so it was cool to think about that and to think about where this is, but I would love to give any notes and thoughts you have to John, just as a thank you to him for his book and for all of his hard work for the metalsmiths through the world, through the 45, 50 years of his career. So send him my way. Any of those you wanted to see pulled up close beyond that, or any questions?
Which one was the conical again?
The
conical?
conicals were they look like cones. They go up into
Yeah.
that tube. And that was in chapter 3, almost at the very end. So he did a series after we did bezels for more traditional shapes and styles. Then we went into the double tube and the capped bezels and tongue shapes. And then towards the very, very end of that chapter was the conicals. And they're up.
The channel set?
The channel set was in chapter 6. It's false channel set, not true channel set. He doesn't teach true channel set in the book.
Chapter 6?
Chapter 6, yep. And remember that I put the little list saying what we covered in each YouTube chat section. So that if you go click on the various YouTube things, there'll be a little drop down in the information box that tells you what we cover in each one.
Good.
Any others that you were asking about?
Yeah, because I bought the stones, but I never got around to the channel set. But I want to try it.
And again, we did it with squares because I didn't like the quality of the cuts on the round ones I had, and my square cuts were a little more consistent. But it works with rounds. You just get spaces between, like there's little empty spaces between them when they connect together. I personally really like the look of that back-to-back squared up ones. But you could do it with any shape that you can get 2 matching sides to. Right. So it's not really going to be a false channel set if you try to do trillions back to back. That won't really hang out where they need to go. They'll move around, or they'll try to pivot out of position. But around a square, you could probably manage ovals if you're careful, because as long as they're really well cut, they'll have the 2 points that are holding.
Rectangles.
Pardon?
Rectangles.
Rectangles, yeah, or emerald cuts. Yeah. Yep. So anything that you can get those sides neatly opposite each other, and remember to go for well cut stones all the way across, good table, good everything, because it's about getting a snug. I mean, remember those are in our flush settings, which means that they have a tension element to them, a pressure and tension element. And he actually goes over some of the false channel stuff again in. So he does it in 2 different places. He does it in our graver settings and in our Gypsy Flush Settings chapter a little bit. It's sort of weird. He kind of repeats some of it, I think, because he does all of the Graver setup in the chapter 5 and then goes back and covers how he's using the Gravers in support of that again. Or maybe it was only on the flush setting that he repeated himself a little bit, but it was like he couldn't decide which chapter that chunk of information could be in when he was writing it. Other questions or others that you wanted to see things close?
I kind of want to put myself on a schedule and start from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I learned so much.
I
and then
agree. Yeah.
I haven't gone back, it's like, it's on me, I know it's on me, but I'm a structure type of person. I need schedule.
Well, the nice thing is that you could do something like commit to just doing the ones in a given chapter this year. So it's not the pressure of like, I had no idea this was going to be a 1.5 year long project. I kind of figured 9 months to a year. But a few interesting things came out of it for me. One, it's way harder to do this work when I'm on screen with you guys than if I'm just sitting in my studio. Like I can do a lot more immediate correction of my mistakes when I'm not having to explain, hey, don't do what I just did. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it. And so I didn't account for the amount of time each one of them would take me. There were definitely some things where I had to sort of, there were a couple places where I had to stray from what John does because I'm not physically capable of some of the things that he's able to, or he's been able to do. So give yourself, like honor your own practice, I guess I would say. Be gentle with yourself. Don't be like, I must finish this entire book in this amount of time. Think, I'm going to work on improving my skills in this chapter, because no matter what, like none of these that are new to me on this board are ones that I'm going to be out like, oh damn, now I've got it, now I'm doing it. In a few of them I was practicing some of them before and after to try and figure out what I had or hadn't done right, but there's a bunch of them here that I would have to do 100 of before I'm going to be good at them. Our emerald cut today being one of them. The amount of scrap material I have from trying emerald cuts is kind of offensive. So yeah, give yourself time. Let me put the board out of the way. And then we will dive in. We're going backwards a little bit. We're going to chapter 3. And other than noting that at the beginning of the chapter, John recommends 22 gauge or 20 gauge material for this particular exercise. You can go thinner. Oops, am I not? Let me make sure my camera is back in position for you guys. That's ish. Should be in a little closer. Oop. Nope, I'm out of position. I gotta get my things adjusted. Is that pretty good?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So other than that note at the beginning where he talks about that, the weight of the material. And again, you can go heavier, but I'm going with straight up 22 gauge because this is going to be a little challenging no matter what to get my cornering. We're really starting on page 71. And I'm going to go through some of the notes I made during this last thing, because this was a situation where we found a labeling error in one of the images. Or labeling lack of clarity. So if you are looking at page 71 in the book, down at the bottom, there's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. What has gotten me stuck, I'm gonna, instead of leaving you on my bare screen, I'll give you my face as I'm looking at the book. One of the things that got me stuck is that the measuring appeared to be marked out as, let's see, he did B up in the upper right and A down below, and then C over to the left. But when we compare it to what is on 6, those letters don't line up, right? The C and B should be switched. So A is our longest side, B is our medium side, and C is our tiny side, if we're comparing it to the little number 6 layout chart. Everybody got that correction?
So C and
Yes.
D. C
Yeah,
and D,
so
so
as
instead,
the, say
so
again?
what are you saying?
I'm
You're
saying that
that's-
the letters that he's got on bullet 3 of those images.
Yeah.
You want to cross out the B and C and switch them. Because then they will match the lettering that he's got laid out in bullet 6.
So we're crossing out number 3.
You're not
number
crossing
6.
out number 3, you're just, so that, see the letters around his sides where he's got them labeled A, B, and C?
Yes,
B and C are reversed.
reverse.
Yep.
Okay, I
So
wanna
A
put
is
next
our
to-
longest side, B is our medium side, and C is our tiny corner sides. And then when you look down at the image on 6, you'll see that it matches. A being the longest side we see in there, B being the medium size we see in there, and then C being all the little corners.
Okay, okay, yeah, I got it now.
Got it. And then I think it, so, and now it also matches what we see in 4. So it was only the image in 3 that was wrong for the labeling.
Mm-hmm.
The other important part about this that was really, really subtle in these drawings, and that I could not, when I was first doing this, I couldn't connect what he was telling us about how we're marking our measurements out. And it helped me to draw a little bit of an extension line from what he's got on that drawing in 3, is that we are not, when we're taking our calipers and we're measuring our stone, we're not actually measuring the stone. We're measuring the stone as the angles intersect on the outside wall. So he has this stretch about picking up a strip of material that's as thick as what we're using for our measuring device. It's because we're putting it up against the stone and imagining that the line goes further out. It's that further out part that is the magic to keep our corners from being too small. I'm going to draw this on the whiteboard because this one is hard to see in his little drawings.
So you're talking about the cutlet itself? Is that what you call it? The cutlet? I forgot.
At the what?
You're talking about the actual line, the cutlet? Isn't that what you call
The
it?
coulette? No.
coulette.
So it's not about the coulette. It's about the positioning of the stone relative to the material. So let me see if I can get this. So if we have a stone like this, and we're looking at it from the top, it's got its nice faceting in here for us. It's a pretty stone, and it's got these angles. So when we're measuring, we are not measuring corner to corner. We're measuring with a piece of metal that's the right thickness. We're measuring out from, I'm going to get a separate color because it's not going to show well otherwise. We're measuring from this point on the outer edge of that. It's a tiny little bit of difference from this measurement to this measurement, but what it does is it widens the angle. I'm going to exaggerate it. So it's widening our angles out so that this like 1/4 millimeter difference, that this is bigger than this would be, makes the difference for when we make our cut and cornering. So if you are finding that every time you try this kind of cornering, you're ending up with too small a spot for the corners of your stones, it's because you're measuring the stone corner to corner instead of the stone plus the material, which becomes a wedge, right? So that's the thing, because I kept getting either too small, or then I'd account for my material, but I'd be doing it wrong. So it'd be too big or too short, or whatever. So I'd end up either with too short from here to here. And it's not just at the corners, guys. Every piece, every measurement that we're going to take has its own angle expansion, right? So
Ray, then do you have scrap metal that you lay against the stone and that's how you figure it out, or
scrap, or a strip that you haven't yet done anything with that's the same gauge. All he cares about is it the same gauge that we have? Because that he says that in section on page 71, he's saying, looking down at the right-hand column, looking straight down on the stone, note that there's a straight line that bisects the angle of each corner. These radial lines subdivide into two smaller angles of slightly more than 60 degrees. Hold a small strip of metal the same gauge as the bezel. So this is the outer wall, not inclusive of the inner wall, against the edge of the stone where the fitting will begin. Allow the end of the metal to extend a little bit beyond the corner of the stone. Visualize the straight radial lines extending out beyond the girdle of the stone at both ends. And that's what he's actually showing us in this itty bitty drawing. You'll see that his caliper points touch drawing number 3 as if they've hit that upper portion of the V, right? I'm sitting here waving my hands at you guys. So we've gone beyond. I can't get my V to show for you guys. We've gone beyond. And then we've waited for the metal. His touchdown point is on the outer side of that. That is the magic that you have to be really precise on to get this. Okay, but between the words and the pictures, I didn't get it from either one of those. I got it from the aha of that's what's happening to me, and putting those two things together. It's really a subtle, tiny amount of material difference, but it's what gives us our room to make the saw angle, right? Because we're going to cut the angle in and corner it. So that is.
Yeah, and I didn't pick up that the first time you covered that.
Right. So that it was probably part of my failure the first time I did it on screen.
No, I didn't
Or that
do
I've
that.
tried this once or twice
No,
on screen.
I think I was concentrating more on switching the B and C and not paying attention to the.
Yep. Well, that's the
script.
benefit of us all going through this again. You know,
Yeah.
there's a couple of these that really there's some nuance to it that wasn't there for me in the first pass. I'm also gonna, so this is the one that he starts us doing the 2-layer bezel. And it's also one that I found I still have a really hard time making this when I've made the 2-layer bezel. I would rather cut my outer strip and then my inner strip. Simply because then I know for sure, before I've wasted a lot of time and material on a soldered strip, I know whether I've successfully framed my outer. Doing the inner one, I find a lot easier once I have and I know it works outer. So I'm going to choose to do this in 2 pieces, even though he shows us in the book the 1-piece way. As a reminder, he shows us both versions of doing, remember we did 2 versions, 2 approaches to many of these early on. He just gave us the description for how to do the other one on this. I find I'm having a harder time getting clean corners when I have the 2 layers there. I'd rather get a really perfect outer frame and then futz with the inner frame. So that's why I'm going to do it as 2 parts. Let me see what other notes I wanted to point out. This was the setting that made me get an extra pair of calipers. So if you have dividers and a couple of pair of calipers, his idea of making sure that you have 3 sets and you keep them all set to their measurement is an important one. It makes it a lot easier. And that you have a really equally cut stone. One of my early failure points when I was on before was I used an inexpensive, poorly cut stone. So I had one of my corners was a little different than the other, which of course means that one of the long sides and one of the short sides is a little different than its mate. So if you're practicing this for the first time, get a properly machined. It doesn't have to be high quality. It just has to be a high quality cut. So you could, if you get a manufactured stone, it's more likely to have that precision. You know, get something that is bulk produced by machine rather than a hand cut stone, and practice with that first. You guys are going to die when you see the stone I've chosen for this one, because I was like, if I'm going for it, I'm going for it all the way.
So when you
right.
when you buy those manufactured stone, I mean, what do you look for? I mean, you see a list of information, but they never say that.
Yeah, so it's really the quality of the manufacturer you're buying from. If they are a company that is making mass-produced, like if I were getting synthetic stones, I'm going to assume that they are doing all of that work by machine. And like I'd buy synthetic I'd buy CZs or something like that have been manufactured, because they're going to be bulk producing them and they're not going to be hand cutting them. And therefore they're using massive machines that are doing precision cuts. But then you still might have an occasional foible here and there, but just get a bunch of cheap stones that look like they should be well cut. I'm just saying, don't use your favorite whatever stone, because these corners are likely to chip if you do it wrong, right? So get something you're not as stressed over. And having that precision means that you can then keep your 3 measuring tools set to the A, B, and C sizes. And your constant checking isn't about, have I made a minute 0.2 millimeter change to my measuring device? You got it locked in, and that's going to help a lot, right? If I had thought about it, I would have just bought 3 pairs of dividers instead, because I like the dividers' ability to hold better than my electronic ones. They'll lock in, but sometimes you can bang them around a little bit. But I'm gonna use 2 pairs of electronic and 1 pair of digital manual dividers today. Let's see, next things that I noticed. We've got all the usual, which was we have to make sure our inner wall gives us enough room for the bottom of the stone. And let's see, we talked about the consecutive sides. John wants us using a very fine saw blade, so either a 2/0 or a 3/0. Not a very fine, I guess, a fine saw blade. We're not using our triangle files or our square files like we do when we're doing a square cut. So this is tiny amounts of material taken away. Guess what? It's just about the amount that we gave extra by doing that V that we talked about a moment ago, right? So it's giving us that leeway to do the cornering. And then let's see. He points out that if we get it done carefully, it'll fit well, but if one side is too short, we can still use that squeezy technique. That's another reason I prefer make the outer wall, then make the inner wall, because I have yet to have any success squeezing the already soldered together step bezel. I don't know whether it's my arm strength or whether it's about how I get the proportions, or whether it's that tiny bit that's only 1/2 of the material thick that I can't get an equal stretch. So I never get anywhere resizing something that's already got its inner frame. I can resize it if I'm just doing the outer frame, get that super sweet, and then make my interior to fit it, right? So I'm going to make sure that I have a beautiful exterior fit before I even touch the inside line. Any questions about that before we jump in to this attempt? Okay.
So are you gonna try to cut it, shape it? Are you gonna solder it and then?
Oh yeah,
do
we're
the
soldering
inner?
today. We're doing the whole thing today if I can do it in this pass.
Okay.
So we're first gonna make our exterior frame and solder it. And then we're gonna see that our fit is 100% where we want it to be, and then we'll make the interior and solder it in place. So let's see, anybody else with, I realized I didn't bring up chat for myself, so I can't see if anybody's bringing chat requests to me. Let me double check that. Come on, chat, where are you? Oh, it's coming and going. Okay, chat is up for when I get chat messages from you guys. And come on. Get out of my way there. Oh my goodness, my screen is not behaving well today. Okay. So let's take a look at this stone we're going to use. And it's pretty in an ugly kind of way. I'm going to zoom in for you guys. So it's a fancy cut ametrine.
Ooh.
But it's machine fancy cut. So this stone I picked up at an estate sale of someone who collected what's the TV gem show? I can't remember what it's called.
JTV.
Gem TV, yeah, whatever that is. So they had piles of those little plastic bubble packets of stones. most of which just made me sneer, but I got captivated by this one. So I don't have any I think I paid like $4 for it. I don't have any really strong feelings about it, other
Oh
than
my God.
I like the concept of this. I would love to see it when it's done by a hand cut artist, because it has a fairly low profile overall, but it does have precision to its cut. And so that's what I was looking for. And if it comes out looking great, excellent. I have a fun setting that I can do. So I'm starting with my 22 gauge. I'm going to find out the height that I want for my overall piece, working the outer wall. Make sure I'm zeroed. So I'm always going to leave myself a little excess in case I want to trim away or whatever. And in truth, I only need enough to go over the lip, but this has a fairly shallow top to it, shallow table. So I'm going to go with, I'm going to actually go with 13 millimeters.
Rachel, bring it down a little bit.
Oh,
so I
the
can see-
stone. Sorry, let me zoom back out a little.
I can see how you're measuring it
Yeah.
there. Okay.
So
thank
what
you.
I'm looking for is table to coulette. Oh, table to coulette. See if I can get that at an angle that you guys can see. Sorry. Let me see if I can position this some way. So I'm looking table to coulette. Can't get my fingers out of my own way. Table to coulette plus a little bit to give myself some filing room, and so that it doesn't bang against whatever's behind it and so on. And I'm giving myself a generous millimeter just to get myself up to an even 13 millimeter height, but it's going to depend on your stone. You may have a shallower coulette than I do. I don't know if it's actually called the coulette when it's the body, when it's not a point, but anybody know the answer to that? Is there a
Keel.
keel? Is that a good, is that a real term or made up?
I've heard it called that before, but
Nice, okay. Like the keel of a boat? That kind of makes sense, because it's what's underneath the water. Okay, so I'm just doing a 13 millimeter. I know I've got a nice clean straight edge over here. My 22 gauge. I'm giving myself a good long strip of it. If I can't make it with this strip, then there's something wrong with my sizing. And I'm just going to cut this with shears, because 22 gauge is always going to be a cleaner, straighter cut for me with shears than it is with saw. But if you prefer sawing your straight lines, you go for it. There is no one to tell you otherwise. The downside of shears, as always, is that we are getting a bit of a curl. But since we're going to be doing a lot of manipulating of this, that's okay. And you just want to make sure that your stone is going to be hanging out inside the bounds of that material, which it is. I'm going to just flatten that curl a little bit.
So you're not giving yourself any extra, just.
I am. I've
33
given myself
millimeters.
about a millimeter extra,
Oh, you did 1 millimeter extra. Okay.
give or take. So it's going to depend on the size of your stone and how you plan on setting it. You can give yourself more than that. I just am accounting for room to sand down the bottom,
Yes.
and room to not let it bump up against whatever I'm setting it against. I don't want it hitting the finger if it goes on a ring or what have you. All right, so I've got my strip, and I'm gonna see my measurements next. So let's think about how I want to do this. I've got my giant pair that I think I will use for my largest measurements. Hopefully my batteries haven't died since I last used this. Not. Okay, so this one is going to represent my longest side, and no matter whether you think it's a well-cut stone or not, you're going to measure both sides for it to see if they are in fact equal. So all I'm measuring now is to say, are they equal? I'm going to then take a measurement with the material in the way of it. So these ones are looking nice and equal. I might as well just, with this setup, do all of the checks. So my side B is There. Also looking equal. And my little sides, I got to check all 4. Going to the corners. So my corners are not exactly where the facet ends on this stone. But I want to count not by the facet, but by the corners that are actually there. And the corners, while the facets don't look equal, the corners are looking pretty darn good.
Rachel, could you just hold that and bring it up to the camera?
Sure, let me zoom. Well, I don't know if that's gonna. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
So I'm just checking to see that my corners from corner to corner, so what's happening on this stone, and I'm not sure if it's showing in camera, is that the flat of the facet doesn't, it meets this corner, but it doesn't properly meet this corner on all of them. Like it was machined a little askew, is what I would say. Right? So the outer corner of each comes a little further out than the corner facet. So I'm watching for where are the points on the stone, not where are the facets on the stone. And those points are all equal on all 4 of these.
They are.
Yep. I'll tell you a secret. I checked that before picking this stone. Because I have a lot of emeralds that I have, because crazy me thinks that someday I'll get really good at emerald cut settings. But a lot of them are really badly cut. So I'm trying to find one that's going to give us success today. All right. So now I know that I've got a well-cut stone. Now I need to do my measurements on the assumption of having the material in between. Right. And so in measuring this, I want to measure where the lines would hit if they pass continuing their angle out to the outside. It's a little bit tricky. Come here. Mostly because I can't hold all the things at once. So I'm just going to mark where I'd be if my angle continued on from the point outward. From the point, I gotta keep holding it there though.
So you're measuring B.
I'm currently measuring A. Right? Yeah, I'm doing the long side because I'm going to do this with the long side with the biggest device, and then the medium size, and work my way down from there. So I'm going out to where the extension would be if I continued outward. Come on, real smidge. I'm going to lock that there just long enough to tell you the difference. So I got 16.69, which probably is really 16.7. But when I'm measuring from point to point, without the material in the way, I'm getting 15.04. That seems like even more extreme of a difference than I realized. Big for this.
So the measurements between A and A and A on the other side is a little off.
No. What I'm measuring is the difference between when I'm just measuring the stone and when I'm measuring the stone with that continuation of the angle, which your continuation is going to come from each angle outward, right? So it's coming, it's following this line that way. So what that means is my metal, on the outside of my metal, there's going to be a tiny little triangle's worth of difference between A to A on the stone and A to A on the outside of the angle it's following. And it's a little tricky because it's a tiny amount of difference. And I'm sure there is a mathematical way to say the angle expands, because what you're looking for is the old, the math formula where you do A squared plus B squared equals C squared. In fact, that's exactly the math that would tell us. So if we've got stone here. Okay, and then we're doing our triangles that go beyond it. What we're doing is we're continuing this line, and the metal is coming up here. This tiny little triangle here, and this tiny little triangle, right? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. We're looking for this plus this, and we're adding it to the size of the stone. So if my stone is, what did I say? Something like 15.4. This is, let's call this 15. And this is measured to whatever their angle is. If we knew our angle perfectly, we could get these dimensions. But instead, we're just measuring it with the keeping in mind our angle. And the reason that we can't commit to an angle is that every stone's going to be slightly different, somewhere a little larger than 60 degrees. Right? So we're trying to get the difference of this much plus this much, where it continues out. And I'm trying to hold it and show it at the same time, and it's a little fiddly futzy. So bear with me. I'm going to double check that I, in fact, got my base stone where I think it is. So there's my corner to corner, the stone being 15.34. And then a strip of metal. This is my strip of metal. Flip it over so I can try this again. Yeah, it's not easier to do upside down. So if I continue my angles outward, and then I'm looking for the point on the outer side of that material. $17.6. So we went from 15.34 to 17.6, which is a fairly small change in the larger scheme of things. It just feels a little bit big to me still. So let me confirm, because this is the nerve-wracking part. Yeah, that's way wider than I think it should be. So my gut is telling me to check my numbers again. Where this meets on the outside. Yeah, it's definitely too wide. I'm not sure whether the marking lines is helping me. I'm just trying to do the marks so that I don't have to hold all three things. But I think what I really want is to eyeball where my angle lands in the material beyond the corners. And that feels a little bit more on target. Nope, still too wide. Okay, so I'm now set on going from the stone 15.34, the long side with the material in the way is going to be 16.05. And that gut check feels a lot better to me, because what I'm seeing is it's just a hair's breadth difference on either side, giving me the room to cut it. So I'm going to lock in my large angle. I wish I had better steps to give you guys on this one because it feels awkward as I'm describing it. So it must feel awkward on the other end as well. Now I'm going to do my B side, yes. So my B side, the stone from corner to corner is 10.51. When I'm expanded out for the Y section going beyond it, following that angle out, it's 11, which is about the same amount of difference, which gives me good feelings. So that's my B side. And then lastly, I'm going to try and get the same thing for my corners. So my corners, I'm not going to get an actual measurement on, I'm just going to get the difference corner to corner with the material in the way. Oop, nope, I just adjusted it. Moving out and expanding. Okay, so we are locking those down. Those are going to be our sizes. And then John has us lay out the chart on the divisions on a single sheet. But then identify, that's because he's doing it. I mean, he does it on the step part when he's doing it this way. So we're going to do it on our bar to measure it out. And we're leaving a little bit of overhang. And he has us starting with, which one does he want us to start with? Make sure he doesn't actually clarify whether we should start on the B end or start on the C end of things.
The picture shows B.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I think it's left to right is what the way we should be reading that. So I think I'm going to start with the B, which makes sense to me. But does he tell us to leave extra hanging off the end in order to be able to finish it up? Clean up my material. Any stray marks on there? Allow the metal strip to extend beyond. Points.
Are you gonna
And
mark?
I am going to mark them. I'm just checking to see whether he's recommending that we leave some overage on our first segment. Make the template small scrap of sheet, scribe a straight line across the surface, somewhat longer than the longest side of the stone. Yes, he does want us to start with a little bit of excess. Okay, so I'm going to actually blacken this whole thing just so that hopefully you guys will be able to see the scribe marks better. And is he really telling us to do the longest side? Make this to make a template. So I have a straight line across its surface. A small mark on the end. He's actually telling us, even though the picture says to start with B, he's actually showing us in the text that he wants us starting with A.
Oh,
So that's a little confusing.
where does it say that?
Oh, no. He's asking us to make ourselves a ruler so that we're not using the dividers every time we're using a setup that we've made. So he's asking us to make a little scrap something that gives us all three sizes individually. I'll see how I feel about that once I make something. Let me see if I can scrap.
You mean like in like a brass sheet or something like that?
Yeah, I don't have any strips of brass, so we'll use what we got. So, and one of the cool tips he has for how you measure things is the little pivoting of your dividers. So he's encouraging us to start with a straight line that we score it. So he's encouraging us to make a straight line. Oh, helps if I hold it solidly. Make a straight line and then measure our longest side, which I'm going to do here, and make a mark for where it's going to be. And then putting our calipers or our dividers on the mark. He's suggesting we pivot it to give ourselves, that doesn't make sense to me. What am I reading wrong? All small mark, place the tip at the indentation and swing the other leg, crossing the scribed line to record the length just measured. I don't know why he's telling us to score it because it changes the dimension if you do that. But I'm going to mark out our A. And double check it that it still meets my A requirement. It does. And this one I'm going to mark as an A. And then we need a C and then a B.
Are you still reading from page 71?
No, I'm on 72.
Okay, okay. So I'm like, where is she?
Okay, making the mark, putting the score.
Okay.
Double checking that this is in fact what I want. Nope, it's not. It's too small. I get the C on this side instead. You know, need me mark 3 times, measure 74. Trust my own measuring skills on this one. Go.
Excuse me.
Say again?
No, I'm sorry. I just sneezed.
Oh, is in height?
Thank you.
Okay, there is our C. And then we're going to get a B as well. We're going to be next.
I wonder if you could use this like with thick cardboard or something.
Yeah, you might be able to, just making yourself a ruler. Oops, except that I went from the wrong line on that one, so that's not going to do me any good. We're going to make a whole separate one. Let's see how many risks I can put in place to getting good measurement. Whatever it is, I'm going to be also remeasuring with my calipers at this point.
Okay.
So this is our B.
So
Goes in ways that you guys can see them. Okay, so we've got our A's, B's, and C's in there using the ruler that he's recommending, but I'm also going to be paranoid on this and double check using my calipers that I've left locked in place. Okay, so he claims on lower half of 72 that it's easier to use these, but he also says you can also just use 3 dividers. So we are going to start with the B that we saw in the picture on the prior page. And I'm going to also leave myself a little excess material. I'm going to check that my end is actually squared up. that can impact my success. It is. And we're going to do our first measurement of B plus a little bit. Oh, yeah, B, because that's what's in our measuring. So this one's B. And if I'm checking it, it's B plus a little bit. So I'm going to put where it's going to end. I'm not sure I'm sold on this. Make yourself a separate template if you can have 3 measuring devices that stay locked. I think you're going to be in better shape.
It's almost like making 2 bezels.
It isn't, because you're only taking it as literally a measuring device that you're going to be repeating from.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a little like I'm transferring to transfer, which is making me feel a little weird. So one of the hardest things for me is remembering that between every other one is that C location. It doesn't go A, B, C, A, B, C, or B, C, A, B, C, A. It goes B, C, A, C, B, C. So now I got to put a C in there for me. So I'm going to line up. Now I can see some benefit to having this scored in, because what I'm able to do to make my marks is I can line up my score marks on the material and just scratch it in, coming across the line that I've already got. So I can maybe see why we want a template for this. I'm going to check each, oops, that's not the right one. I'm going to check each one as I do it. My C is on Q, so that's a little C there. Then I'm going to do an A. And I'm lined up on that one. I'm lined up on that one. Okay, there's my A. And I go back to C from there. Oops, let me check my A. Be meticulous. My A is still on track. Line up the lines. Okay, gang, I'm kind of buying into this, having something that's got its score marks that I can run across.
Yeah, but it seems like there's just more room for error.
Yeah, it does. And yet trying to get the coarseness of the calipers to give me that same measurement each time. So what's so finely scratched in here that you guys probably can't tell, but because I've got score marks and because it's the same gauge material, all I'm doing is running my scoring device down my existing measured line into place, and then I can cue it up and line it up before I mark my next one. So that's what I'm liking about this, is that instead of having to go, wait a minute, take a measurement, mark it off of that, and then score it, the line is a continuation. So I'm sort of meh, I can see why. I gotta trust in the Cogswell know-how more than I have been on emerald cuts. So I'm lined up. I've got my B line there. Marking it. Checking that it's going to actually match my B. Yes. Oops, helps if I actually get it where I'm supposed to, though. To B, do another C. I think really what should happen, though, is that just everybody should make exactly the same size precision emerald cut stones. Then the world would be an easier place for us. B. Final A, and then last C. Yeah, line back up. So lined
So
up.
did you just measure 1C and then are you just moving that?
I am, yeah. I've literally
Okay.
got 1C, 1A, and 1B. And I'm
Okay,
using it as my guide. So they each have their side scrapes, right? And I'm just positioning the
Okay.
leftmost score in my line that I've just marked on the real piece, and then score from the next one down. So it's got a little like runner that I have to follow when I do this. Can I make that measurement right? That's an A. So yeah, there's I'm sort of, it's growing on me. It's growing on me. We'll see how the results play out. Check it with my A measurement. Good. And one last C. Okay, so we have A and C. I'm going to try and zoom in for you guys to see this gridded out. See if it'll show up for you. Right, so we've got our starting B with a little extra for when we need it. Then we got C, A, C, B, C, A, C, and that's the rest is scrap. Okay, so we're gridded. Now we move on to actually bending and folding. So we're now looking at the very bottom left of page 72. Scoring for an octagonal bezel is done with a medium fine saw blade, 2/0 or 3/0, rather than a needle file. And as each successive corner is bent, check it against the stone. That is our super important part. Okay. When a corner is correct, solder the joint with hard solder to lock it in position. So we're going to do a cut, we're going to solder. We're going to do a cut, we're going to solder. Let me switch my blade out because it was working very coarse the other day.
Okay, so before you do that, are you going to transfer what you just did?
This is the transfer. I transferred it using this measurement that gave me 1A, 1B, and 1C.
Oh, okay, I
I
missed that
transferred
part.
it to my strip.
Okay, okay. Why do you need a strip though? You could have done that on paper.
You could, but what I'm liking about this, let me draw what I'm describing about how this is helping, because it's kind of interesting. I would not have considered it. So here is my real strip, right? And I've got it covered in, I've colored it all in so that I'm really seeing things. And then my sample strip, which has a score mark here and a score mark there, which equals the A, and then one, or actually that's the C. One that's an A, and one that's a B, right? So what I've got is a channel that I've scored, just a light scoring for each of these runs across my ruler. This one's the ruler, right? And it has a little bit of extra material hanging off each end. So what I'm doing is I made my starting score. In this case, we chose the B, and I lined these up right over here and ran my score tool. In this case, I'm just using a needle on the end of a handle, and I scored it by running my needle across with these two butting up against each other, right? So they're flush to one another. So this is really here. And by having it there, I'm scoring down the line and making the mark, right? And then I'm scoring, I'm still holding that solidly in place. I score down the other line, I make the mark. And so by doing that, it's like I'm riding train tracks. And so that gives me an opportunity to make sure that I'm always starting my marks where I need to. And I was doing a score mark, making my squaring up with my little T-square, right? And then making sure I'm lined up. So every time you saw me touch down, I was first touching down on one side to make sure that my track still lined up. And then I scored the other side and then squared it up as well. So it's a little hard to describe and to show when we're doing it in such tiny scale, but I am finding it really, railroad tracks is the best model for it because it's giving me a point to sort of lock in across the two pieces of metal as my starting point. Whereas if I'm using calipers over here and I've got my calipers laid out, oh man, this pen just needs to go. The calipers are laid out with their points here, right? I'm marking sort of conceptually where the point meets. I'm not actually getting a true score mark out of my calipers. And so it's awkward. It's prone to more failure for me. So I'm kind of buying into this, guys. It's working for me. I hope. We'll see when I actually make these cuts.
But wait a minute, don't you
Yeah.
have a C there? Don't you have another C between B?
So again, my ruler only has one of each because I don't want to be measuring off of multiple measuring devices. I want a strip, and it doesn't matter on the ruler. It doesn't matter what order they're in. It's so long as you have lines that make up your C, lines that make up your B, and lines that make up your A, right? So I've got one guaranteed measurement. That's my shortest.
Mhm.
This is my middle, short, middle, and long. And then I'm just moving the ruler so that I'm always using this pair of C whenever I'm making a C on my final plate. I'm using this set of B whenever I'm making a B on the plate. I'm using this set of A for both of the A's, right?
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, if I knew I were doing dozens of stones that were precisely cut, that are
Mhm.
all the same, I might make one where I've made really, really intentionally deep channels and just repeat it. It would be my template for all
Mhm.
things framing. You
Okay.
can never guarantee that even a machine cut stone is going to be perfect. So it's not ideal, but depending on the quality of your stones that you've got, maybe you'll have something good. All right. So I was getting a thin saw blade. Any other questions on that one?
So it's like a measuring cup.
It's a measuring, yeah, that's all it is. We just made ourselves a ruler, and it happens that having those scored lines gives me personally more precision than scoring by marking where the dividers tell me to go. Your mileage may vary. You may be exceptionally good at identifying the tips of your dividers, but when we're working on a stone that has so much nuance to the tiny differences in width, anything I can do to get myself more lined up is better. Yeah, you guys have seen throughout the last year and a half where my struggles lie in terms of math and measuring and all that sort of stuff. And there are people who just instinctively can get these measurements. I am not one of them. I have to live with that. I'm okay with that.
Okay,
right,
Rachel,
so-
remember, I didn't even know what a millimeter was when I started, so.
There you go. There you go. All right, so
So-
I am starting by scoring the line between my scrap that I started with. So my piece was like this. I'm going to be scoring the scrap line leading to my very first B. And this now is starting to cut what we see laid out in area 6 on the bottom of page 71. So we've marked off our divisions in preparation for scoring. We've used a square to make sure they're perpendicular. Now we're going to cut our first line in.
But Rachel,
Yep.
at the bottom of page 72 on the left, he makes a statement. He says, as resaw into each bend is necessary until the correct angle is achieved.
Yep.
So you're going to know when that correct angle is?
So we're going to know by starting the first 2 scores that we do, we're not going to get. And that makes me realize that I do not want to actually cut the angle on my scrap. That scrap is ultimately going to go away. So good point. I don't want to cut that first angle. I want to cut this first score between B and C as my first bend. So I'm going to cut the B to C, and we're going to do a light scoring of it, and then we're going to start to bend it. And if it doesn't go far enough to hit our angle, we're going to have to do a little bit more. But in truth, we're going to need to get our first 2 cuts. Oops, my blade is a little too tight. We're going to have to get the first 2 cuts before we get our first angle, right? Because we have to get enough to make a bend, a corner bend. And so once we get those first 2, once I get my saw blade to stay still, then we will have the ability to make our first bend, which is the first corner of the stone.
Well, I guess you know, as I've done other score and bending, they say go 2/3 of the way through, or
Yep.
go blah, blah, blah way through. So I was just thrown by his statement. The saw until you get the right angle was a little
So
nebulous.
I think he's talking about that in the context of touching up by using the saw. So once you've done your normal 2/3 of the way through, you're going to do a bend. But if it's not a deep enough bend, then you bring the saw into the corner rather than bringing files in.
Okay.
Right? It's the corrective use of the saw that he's talking about there. So I'm just sawing down the very first line of the B into C, B1 into C1. And as always, we got to be aware of our own imbalance in doing things. So we want to probably come at it from both directions. There's so little material to hold on to. This one's going to be a little tricky. And a light saw for this. There's no perfect angle. It's whatever lets you engage to start that fold. So I'm going about 2/3, and I'm going to go grab my parallel jaw pliers, which are magical for this. If you don't have parallel jaw pliers, remember you can use your flats, but parallel jaw will help you create your angle better. And with the parallel jaw pliers, John, this is one of John's early tips that I got from him. You are not bending the pliers to the material. You're bending the material to the pliers. So you put your pliers just outside of the line you've sawed. Yeah, get right positioned. And you're pushing the metal upward with your fingers to that angle, right? And you ask what angle we're getting. Well, we're trying to match the angle that will follow the stone, which is that somewhere beyond the 60-degree mark that we're aiming for. So we're going to check it and rough it in because we've only got 1 cut. That's looking pretty darn close. So I'm not going to muck with that one. In fact, if anything, I may need to open it a little. Gently, gently. Getting my angle there. And I'm going to actually cut the second one before I do my solders because I want to get the full corner to make sure that my very first angle is set up correctly. So I'm now cutting the line between C and A. If we're reading from left to right in the chart number 6, this is the second segment that we see. Staying on my carefully measured lines, because this is going to be the tell the truth, did we get the corner measurements right? Again, I want to check from both sides for a little bit of my sawing. And once again, using my parallel jaw pliers. And this time I'm on the outer side of it, or the other side of it rather, because there's not really room for my pliers in the tiny little segment that is the C slice. And then I'm bending to it. I don't have a lot of leverage, so it's going to take a little bit of effort. But once I get a basic bend in, I can check and see how my cornering is going. And do I fit? Oh, without dropping and breaking my stone. A little bit more bend in there. And I am, if anything, a smidge loose, meaning I may have gone a little bigger than I needed to in my corner. Oh, no, it's an optical illusion, I think, from the coloration of that bad corner piece and the bad facet, rather. Can't tell. I need something white behind it to see how I'm doing. So I think I'm like 0.01 millimeters too wide, but I want to get it soldered and see if that remains true once I put solder in it. I also want to use some smaller pliers to try and flatten my line a little bit. Let me see what I've got that's going to get in there. So I've got a little bit of a bump, and I can't tell whether my concerns about sizing are because there's a little bump in there. I'm just trying to flatten out my fold. And that may require overfolding and then moving it back from that fold. And we have some leeway once we've got this basically put together, because we're going to be able to, if we need to, we can always saw the corner again a little bit to get it to pull back out. Yeah, I've overbent it at this point. Straighten that out. Oh, let's see if I've got my B side. Yeah, I'm definitely too big in this corner.
Why? What do you
So
think
I
that
don't
is?
know why. I don't know what the answer is, whether I measured wrong on the
Looks
stone.
good from here.
Pardon?
I mean-
So there's a tiny, tiny bit of gapping that I'm not happy about in the B corner, but I also can't quite see whether it's that I haven't folded well. Let's see if that bend is what's doing it. It's a little bit loose, I think. Nope, it was just the angle I had. I think we're looking good. Okay, so we're gonna go over to the soldering bench. Finally, at long last. And we're gonna just put a little bit of hard solder in the corners. Showing the bench, yes. Nice clean brick. And just putting a little flux in the corners. This is like every other corner fluxing and soldering we've done. We're just gonna get a little to flow down what we've sawed. I forgot I did my brand new, flipped over my bench block, so I gotta put my solder back down. Hang on a sec, I need a Sharpie marker.
Oh darn. Rachel, your camera is at the very tip top
Got it.
of the, okay, yeah,
Better?
better,
Yes.
thank you.
Good thing. So I'm just marking up my bricks. The marks go away eventually, but I put them on the side too. I don't know if you guys have ever seen me set up a brick. This was something that John showed us when we were in a class that we were all sharing bench space, and we each brought our own brick. And we just marked up the brick with our solder. Maybe somebody in the class mentioned it when we were all doing it, but we were carrying our bricks back and forth, and we would forget which corner we had put what solder on. So that just gives you a little space, and then you put it on the sides and you can follow it through. I am going to bring out my chip solder, but you can absolutely use wire solder for this. Just make it small pieces, because you don't want to gum up your corners too much. You want to just have enough to make the flow happen. You don't want, because we're making such a snug fit that we do not want to overdo it and ruin the spacing we have filling it up with solder, or else we're going to be filing till the ends of our days. It's just starting up the torch for the first time today, so bear with me. There we go. So just a bit of a ball of solder up at the top of each of those connector points. Come on, stick for me. There we go. And then the goal is to fill down the area that you have sawn. Sawed, sawn, whatever the appropriate. Too far down. Just trying to get it to flow. Silver solder has capillary action, so it should find its way. If you're heating in the right direction, it should find its way down the saw mark, as this is doing. Come on, all the way down. Don't be shy. One of them went, the other one is being a pain. Solder all the way down, please. Go to the far side. There we go. Get that blob of solder out of my way. There we go. All right, so quench that. Go back. Cut the next segment. I'm gonna actually trim a whole bunch of material off of this because we hopefully don't need the stuff that goes beyond. And it's in the way. Right, so we've got one good corner. It's looking nice. It's even at the right angle, close to it. Little tweak on the B side. And we've got our A, and best of all, I can see that when I saw my next corner, which will be the A to the C, that my lines are lined up for this end to make my next bend. So now that we've got a stable starting point, let me trim. And I'm going to leave myself enough for if I goof up.
So how are you keeping the line straight?
How am I getting the corners straight?
No, the actual line that you're sawing into.
So remember, we scored it. I used this little scoring tool. So there is a starting line here.
Okay.
And I'm running my saw carefully down that. And you'll see I'm not doing this kind of sawing. You'll see this weird, like, this is one of the few times I do angled at this weird angle sawing. Because what I'm trying to do is really catch that score mark, top and bottom. And then once I have the top and bottom caught, then I'm doing slow, steady strokes. If you're having a hard time keeping it straight, this is also a time where I'd recommend saw and lift, saw and lift. Because if you're getting wobbly, it's probably on the upstroke rather than the downstroke. And so I'm only doing a few strokes until I've got the channel going. And if you look at it, I don't know if I can show this on, if I can get close enough for you to see this on camera. But when we're sawing like this, wrong way. You see how can you see that there's less silver sparkle in the middle of my cut
Yes.
than there is at each end?
Mm-hmm.
That's because when I'm putting that downward force, our saw blade is flexing so that it's hitting the outer edges more than the middle. And that's one of the reasons we flip around, is to make sure that we're catching from both angles the balance point between them, right? Oops, I'm out of camera when I do that. Let me back up a little bit further. So we have to, part of it is you're not using real force. You're using a very gentle saw blade to make your lines, and being really, really conscious of how you're evening it out. Because that challenge that I mentioned on my edge, when I said earlier, I said, oh, I'm not getting a very good straight fold. It's because I don't have as clean and as deep a gouge in the middle as I do at the outside edges of my cut. So you can try to support the saw a little bit, the saw blade being a little bit pushed down there, but it's gonna happen no matter what because of the way that we saw and because of the flex of the saw blade. So I'm now gonna make this bend. Again, I'm folding the metal to my pliers, not the other way around. If I were doing a square, I could be really precise and hammer with a mallet or something like that. I could hammer to the line, but because I don't want a full bend, I can't really do that. So instead, I'm going to use the pliers as best I can to get a clean fold at the angle that I want. And since I've already got an angle to compare it to, I can start in the approximate angle that I had on the other end. Okay. And now I'm following my line again. I need to bring this in a little bit. So it's the bend before it that's a little out of whack. And I have a little leeway to bend it, even though I've soldered that a bit. So now I'm following my lines. Start. And a little too steep of an angle on this one. This may be easier on you to do if you put it upside down and on a flat surface, because then you can look down on it to see how it's following. I'm doing okay there. My starting tail is always going to be a little wonky until I get it lined up with what it's ending with. Okay, I'm going to actually again do all of the C cuts so that I take my corner as a set to solder. I think John is actually asking us to do solder each one that you fold, but I really find that I can't be sure of my angle until I've got both of the corner cuts in place. My mark is being a little hard to see. Let me double check my measurement. When in doubt, go back. And actually, in this one, it's going to be easier to do with the calipers. Just to make sure I'm still on the mark. I think I'm on. I am. See that as well at that end. That's what I needed to see. Oh, come here. Stay in line. If you are less comfortable with the sawing and you're more comfortable with a graver, you can use a very thin tipped graver, like super delicate, and score this line. It might get you a better, cleaner line down the center than what the saw flex does, but it's got to be the thinnest little scraped line. Because all we're doing is using that amount of material for the fold. Right, once again, we're lining up our parallel jaw and bending to our bends. Not, oh, I did that backwards. I didn't use my fingers well. There we go. Straighten that out a little bit. I'm going to get my tiny pliers in and straighten my lines even further. Because what I'm trying to do is get it crisp before I fill them with solder, because it's harder to make them crisp once that's done. Now, if you've got a little bit of lumpy bumpy on the outside, if your material is thick enough, you're going to be able to file those corners crisper from an outside visual perspective. It's just that inside it's going to be a little more challenging to get our inner folds in there when we do. Right, and then check and see how we're fitting. Starting corner. Oh, I'm on the wrong side. That's why. Starting corner. So it's gonna be ever so slightly loose on this stone, but like not enough that I'm terrified by it. Yeah, that looseness may just be caused by the wonkiness of some of my straight edges right now. So I'm gonna go with that. Back over to the soldering station. That bright light is distracting a little bit from the reflection. Is that too bright for you guys? Do I need to tone it down so you can really see? See?
I think it's okay.
Yeah, okay. It looks really bright on my screens. Just tell me if this improves visibility. Is that any better? No change, doesn't matter. Okay, so
Eh.
once again, yeah, question?
No, I just said, doesn't.
No change for you guys,
No,
okay?
Either way.
All right, so we are once again soldering flow down those corners. Hard solder. If John had his way, we'd be using a hard solder for all these steps and then using easy solder for the attaching it to things.
I'm just amazed that you're not soldering all those little chips together.
So I'm keeping my heat out, just out at the edge of my circle, and it's the heat of the pick that's causing them to be picked up.
No,
That one, so pick soldering is one of the best techniques you can add to your repertoire if you don't already have it, in terms of upgrading your soldering skills. Like what it does for your chain making abilities, what it does for some detail work is kind of astounding. But it does take nuanced practice, and how much flux do you put on, how much do you heat. I personally prefer a steel pick to a titanium one, but it's hard to find the steel picks these days. Lots of them are this is, I think, one of the titaniums, I'm not sure. And I always want that bend in it. With the steel ones, I can put the bend in myself. With the titanium ones, depends, sometimes that'll snap it. But I can't stand a straight pick, and a lot of people learn their pick soldering with a straight pick and then hate it because they can't figure out why they're not positioning right. It's all about having the pointer that tells you where you're about to position your solder. Come on, little guys. If I'm getting to the end of my tank, this is not heating as well as I would want it to. No. There we go.
and you're not using any flux to make that
I
solder
did.
flow.
Yeah, I put a little flux on the corners as I started setting up.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna have to flip my angle again to get this to flow all the way. It is getting a little grubby though, so I'll probably need to pickle it before we do our next round of solder. Come on. So if you are using acetylene, at least, I don't know if the same holds true in propane. There comes a point close to the end of your tank's life when it's just about empty, where the grubby material that is the acetylene fiber, the fiber that's filled with the acetylene component that becomes the gas, gets grubby and makes your soldering suddenly not have as much heat impact as it was. So if you get down towards that last little bit and everything you try to solder is just not behaving as expected, check your tank gauge, just see if it's that. We're gonna wait for that to pickle a little bit and then we'll do our next couple cuts. Any questions so far on where we are and what we're doing? Slow but steady wins the race on this one, hopefully. I'm trying not to
That's gonna
feel
be
overly
cool.
optimistic, but it's looking pretty decent.
Yeah, all I can think about is the fact that in the book you addressed it also, that he wants you to solder two pieces together. I'm just wondering, how are you going to get all those bends once you solder what you do now?
How am I gonna get the inside soldered in?
Yeah.
Same as
Yeah.
I would if I was doing an oval. I'm gonna make a precision fit, snug,
Mhm.
snug fit. And remember, the benefit of doing the interior piece second is if it's a little too loose, you can stretch it to get it to stick in there. But same as, I don't know if you remember from our very first step bezel, but we had to pinch and pinch and pinch and get it stretched out so far that you can't easily put it in there. We had to tap it in with a mallet. That's
Yeah, I
how
remember
snug you
that.
want your fit. If you can do the same thing, the only thing that makes it more complicated is you have to match all of the angles
Mm-hmm.
a little bit smaller, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
And
you
those
can't use
should-
you can't use the same template on the second one
No,
because angles, that distance is shorter.
yeah, but the
Mhm.
distances should be the stone widths, right? They should fit just under the lip of the stone. So that's the measurement we're gonna use. And I understand why he teaches people to make it out of the double wire, because then you don't have to think about a second round of these crazy measurements. But I just was fighting so hard. I just couldn't get my corners exactly the sizing that I wanted when I was working on the two-step. Like it's something about that step down that makes it much harder for me to get good, straight, clean cuts, and that I wasn't having too much material in the way. And so I was fighting it.
Yeah.
I may
Yeah,
go back after hopefully getting some success with this approach and try it
Mhm.
again with the double
Mhm.
sheet.
Yeah.
But I'd really like to just have one really nice emerald cut setting before I play with variations.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Let's see. My pickle is strong today, so that's fairly clean. Rinse it off. All right. So we've now got several of our sides in play. Oops, I'm on the wrong camera, aren't I? Hang on. We got, so far we're looking pretty darn clean in our cornering. And we're going to do this corner now. So checking my score marks, I have a double score. I've got to double check these and make sure I know. Oh, I marked one out for myself. I told myself one was good. Mark that a little more clearly. These cuts do get harder to get into as you make the turns because your bends get in the way of the prior cut, or the prior cuts get in the way of the newest cut. So it's a little trickier when we get to those final bends. But this one we can get to still. I'm really feeling the not getting my center cut on this one. I can see it's barely touching down the middle. Again, I'm going to do my bend, check my measurements. Cornering, I mean. Doing. So sometimes if you're not getting a good corner, the trick is to just use your parallel gel pliers and squeeze on each side of your fold, and that'll straighten out some of the wonkiness. So I'm just giving it a snug squeeze on each bend, each side of the bend. See how that turn is fitting. Oop, start at the right corner though. Yeah, I'm still feeling like this overall setting is going to feel a little tiny bit loose for me. But I think we're going to be okay with that. So let's take that next cut. Before I make that cut, I want to double check my measurements because that feels a little weird. Oh, it's doing okay.
So have you made a point of marking the top and the bottom? Or does
What
it
I was doing
matter?
is because I've pickled, my marker doesn't show, so it was a little hard for me to see my score marks. And I was just noting I was doing an extra little score on top of the already there score to brighten up the marks.
Okay,
Just so that I could have a clear where's the top and bottom start of my little channel that I had started to score. That's why I was doing that. And it gave me the added bonus of being able to double check a measurement to make sure that it was still in the frame that I expected it, in the size that I expected it to be. Because there's nothing like getting to the very last one and going, oh crap, the other ones are now out of whack. I am a little bit envious of people who just zippity doo dah cut these things and go. But then I think about how John Mazzaros takes a block of thick metal and just saws out the center of the thick block instead of building these crazy foldy frames. And I'm like, okay, I'll keep doing what I'm doing. I don't know that I could cut those angles with my saw from inside the lump of metal. That is not anywhere near deep enough of a cut, though. Okay, once again, foldy part. Again, putting my pliers just to the outside of the line that I've cut, using my fingers to start that bend. I'm going to come back in with my small, clean pliers and or tiny pliers and get in there. This is the challenge if you're not working with such a large stone as I'm working. I've gotten sets at Michael's or Joann's or something of the itty bitty Bedelon, I don't know how they pronounce their name, for just such situations as this. If I were working much smaller, my little C corners would need teeny tiny pliers in order to help me get those bends in place. I want to cut inside of this one a little bit more, get a better curve, get a little of that curve out of this last cut. Always do the touch-ups in tiny, tiny amounts of movement. So we're also bumping up against, I have that extra material on this end. Maybe time to get rid of that, or at least fold it out of my way. But I'm not quite there yet. So let's see. Yeah, this one hangs over farther than I want it to, and I got to figure out why. It's the same size as the other ones.
Point to where it's hanging over. What did you just say?
So this is wider than it needs to be, and I'm trying to figure out which part of my wall is wrong. Because I think my final C segment is a little too wide, or my final B segment is a little too short. Let me see what I can figure out. And then I'll zoom in and see if I can point it out to you, because the other possibility is that I managed to turn my stone around and didn't realize it. Well, there's definitely something overhanging.
Well, that's what I was thinking, that, you know, there might be an orientation to the stone, but you measured that they were
I
equal.
did, yeah. Which is what's frustrating about this. Let me see. Ow.
But don't forget, you also soldered.
I did solder, which tightens things up usually. No, I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that's the right orientation. So that's my starting point. And I'm looking decent. There's a little solder blob I want to get out of the way. It's confusing things.
So you did mark a starting point on that stone.
I did, yeah. There's a corner of the stone that I've got a little dot on. As long as I have my bezel upright from the direction I started in, it was in our first corner. So there's that little mark that's my starting corner. And so it rests pretty nicely here, 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 here.
Bring
And
it
then-
down just a little bit. There we go. Thank
So
you.
it rests pretty nicely in here, in here, in here, and then it starts to go astray. So I think what I did was a little too far in on this cut, which I may be able to correct because I haven't yet soldered. I may be able to take back a little bit of an angle. We're going to find out together. I can recut further down. Makes the corner better. So the challenge being that it has a trickle down effect to the things beyond it, right? Because once I've widened this, I now have to narrow it on the other side.
So to widen that or lengthen it, whatever you call it, you just angled your saw blade to outside.
I literally cut another channel just to the inside of what I had been cutting, which is not a recommended procedure. It's better that I got my measurement right before I started that cut. So I'm just trying to tighten in the fold from here to here. This line, it had been cut here. I'm now trying to fold it back a little ways. Which may, because it's such a small amount of change that I need, that this may be a cheat I can manage, but it is definitely a cheat. Angle back. Okay. That may be enough. Let's see. No. I'm still a little wonky further down. Sing here. See, when I look at it from behind, it looks okay.
What about if you flip the whole thing?
So I tried that because I definitely started on this side up. This has been my
Okay.
starting dot corner.
Right.
But I can try and see if I'm getting a better fit from the other direction. But you could be right. It could be that I have angled things strangely. No, that looks worse, not better.
Okay.
Which my dots start. So let's see. I think I've got it to a point where I will be able to straighten my angles enough to make it work on the bend that was problematic. But I'm now gonna have to trim in the next cut down even further. Let's see, that is making my C mark come in. New mark. We shall see if I can recover from this, gang. I suspect I'm gonna have to go for a grant to do nothing but make and set emerald cut stones for a summer. That'll be miserable. Okay, so I'm again correcting the fold a bit. A little more support before I make that bend. Correcting the fold inward to try and tighten it a little bit more than it was. So it's not going to be as crisp a corner inside as my other two have been so far, but it feels like I might be recovering. Let's see what we got. Okay. Oh, so much closer. More bend.
Seems like you'd have to anneal that to get any more movement.
Yeah, what's actually happening is I'm getting stuck on the extra on the end, which I think I'm going to trim a little away to give myself some leeway. Because it's fairly well annealed as a piece. Because we just had it under the torch, but let's see if I've got a little bit more room to maneuver now. This isn't a graceful feeling project. Oh my goodness, better, but still not quite there. I'm going to see if I can get this showing in a way that you guys can see what I'm seeing. Let's see if maybe popping it up on some wax will help us. So, zoom in for you guys. Where are we? You guys are going to be able to see this behind there or not. So what I'm struggling with is this corner here goes a little past where it needs to. And then that causes this corner to go past where it needs to. What I need is a little bit more of an angle coming into right about here. And then I'll have to trim this one to about there. So you can see there's a little bit, you can see when I move this around, there's a little bit of gap. That's not, the white isn't helping to show that at all. There's a tiny little like get the tip of my marker gap in this corner.
Yeah,
That's
I
gonna keep
can
it.
see it.
You can see it? Okay. So that's what I'm fighting. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to make more corrective action, but I'm going to try. Because that's how we roll. Eventually, a side is going to decide it doesn't want to be a side anymore.
Rachel, can you screen out a little bit?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Always forget that when I've been zoomed.
So Rachel, how come you didn't fill those other two lines with solder before scoring a new line?
So I've contemplated that, and
Uh-huh.
what I want to do is get my flat before I do that. Because if I filled them right now, I'd either have to open all the way back up, putting it at risk of weakening and folding, breaking off. So I'm trying to minimize the bend that I do anywhere but the new line. But I contemplated, should I be trying to fill those? I will be filling them for sure once we get the right angle here. And then I may have to do some creative touch-up sawing again, but I don't want to fill them until I know that they're going to be on the side wall, on the corner wall that I want. Otherwise, they're going to stop flexing for me where I need them to flex right now. So close. Come back further. Boom. Okay, so we've solved for this corner. That did the trick there. It's getting snug. Now I have to recut this corner and get that fold to follow the sizing. As always, our preferred method of accomplishing this is to do it right the first time. But also, as always, it's good to remember that we should be able to try and take corrective action. And as I've said to you guys on a lot of occasions, that includes when you're learning something, push the boundaries. Don't give up on a piece because it's failed. Figure out how you would fix what has gone awry until you cannot do any more with it, until it's completely out of options. Okay, we're getting close, but I need to get a little bit more fold at that point. I think I'm at a point where I'm going to need to solder in order to give myself enough strength to put the final little bend in to get that corner. But I'm going to zoom in again so you guys can see what a major change we've had from just that little bit. Here's my corner. So it's this corner that had gapping down here, but no longer does. There's a tiny smidge of gap here, but what I want to do is get solder flowing in all of these and then recut this a little bit. And then I'll be able to make that final little tweak that I need to make on that corner. Okay, so I'm much, much happier with that fit than I was a few moments ago. Hallelujah. Get some of this nasty wax off before I put it under the torch. And we'll go do some soldering. All right, so in this case, I've got about 6 saw lines that I'm having to fill on this corner. And I'm going to put a little trips down on this one because I've been overworking it a ton. Being a little more generous with my solder in an attempt to fill all the lines collectively. Oh, if it'll stick. Right. No. Remember that as soon as we have this sort of boxed in like this, it becomes a little bit of a convection oven in there. So heat doesn't behave quite the same as when you're working on a flat surface, meaning it's got some bounce and it can heat up more inside more quickly than you realize. So just keep an eye out for that. Do a little heating from behind to get that flow going. Set it down to the bottom. Flip this piece to get it to flow. Fill in. Come on, fill all the way in. All right, that's definitely making me happy on the one side. And I've sort of let only a light bit of solder go where the line that I expect to keep. I've been focusing mostly on the lines that I know I'm locking in. What I mean by that is this corner is locked in, so I've soldered it completely. This is the corner I still need to tweak a little bit. So I only soldered the lines heavily that I knew I wasn't going to be further bending on to try and stiffen them up.
Rachel, what tip do you have on that torch?
My default is usually a 1 on a Smith torch, Smith acetylene. I'll go bigger if I'm working with brass or heavy materials. And I will go smaller if I'm doing some detailed touch-up work or gold. But 1 is sort of an everyday. John would flip between 1s and 2s, but the 2s are really because he did such large silver work, you know, when he's doing object wear, that he sort of grew accustomed to a really ginormous torch. Not because of that, but you know, it's part of what influences how he picks. He has more control with a 2 than most of us will have ever in our lives. So he can do the most delicate of things with a ginormous torch tip. All right, so what I want to do is get my pliers in there and try to not do more cuts first, but just improve my cornering with what I've already got. I never actually got to see him in action on any of his large chalice objects, which I was always wishing I could see him working on. But I did take one of his big scale forging, you know, not big scale, but large pieces of forged work things. And so he gets very, very hot with the torch on that. And he actually he taught me how to do a hot silver twist, where one of us was on the torch and one of us was doing the turning of it while it's hot, sort of the same way that you would do a twist on an iron rod. And that was cool. But that was probably the largest torch work I ever did working with him. So at this point, I'm just finessing my bends, really, trying to pinch them a little bit more snugly into that corner. All right, I think I am happy there with that corner now. There's like half a fingernail I can stick in there, but that's a lot improved. So now we have the dramatic get to the end part, which is that we have to cut our final line, which all of that work I did has put my final line. Don't chip my stone, don't chip my stone.
So this would be 4C, C4.
This would be, the 4th C we are cutting next, yes. Which is going to cut into and meet the straight across from the very first B. But we're first going to get that cornering in, and what I see is that all of that movement and adjustment I did has me way, way, way out of cue on my final measurements, right? So now I'm going to do a remeasuring of the last point. Is that in the right corner? I did not get that in the right corner. So I'm off by like nearly half of a C's width at the end of all of those shenanigans I was just going through. Now. That's that. So now I'm marking the outside of the metal where my line, where my angle would cut across to give me my notation of where I'm going to cut the first angle. I'm also going to make note of where I'm going to be cutting in what I'm going to be cutting off of this end, but I'm not going to do that cut off. I'm just going to do my saw mark to get the fold. So that's my starting point. And I'm going to re-square. Get a fresh score. Yep, it's gonna be hard to get in there though. I'm going to do a couple of double checks to make sure that I am not, in fact, cutting it too short. Get the wax out of the way. It's interfering with my ability to tell. I can't say how much I'm enamored of wolf wax for holding things. I'm going to do a little straightening of my walls before I go much further.
Because it's too sticky.
No, I love it. I mean, I adore it. It's useful in ways that I don't think about until I go, oh yeah, I really do have a tool for that already. What I mean when I say I can't say enough about it, I mean, yes, buy some. It's wonderful. Okay. How much of this is how I'm holding this? How much of it is measurement? That's going to fold a little snugly. I think it's over a smidge more than that.
Rachel, when you get done, could you just lift your left hand up?
To show you what I'm holding where.
Yeah. Please.
So I'm squaring up to make a score mark that's repositioned. That is again about, it's almost 2/3 of the material that I put into my final C is getting taken away.
Thank you.
All right. See if we get a final good cut. And we're once again going to our magical pliers, which are now laden in wax. Ugh, bear with me. Get some alcohol out and clean those up in a bit. Okay, we've got a bend. And it's gonna be a little bit challenging because still got excess material on the other corner. So put things back in, mostly are checking to see if we're coming close to our angle. I think it is coming time to take the excess material off the corner. Okay, and I'm gonna try and take this cut of the extra material on my original side B. I'm gonna be trying to make it an angular cut. So I'm gonna cut, this was a trick that Alan gave us, is to remember that you can cut from the inside as well. So I guess I need a better score mark than that. So I'm just gonna trim out my original line B at a bit of an angle.
So you're going to try to make a miter, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I'm
40
basically trying to make a miter. Yeah.
Okay.
Just because otherwise I'm having to sort of file / resize, and I want a snug fit the first time out. So having a miter is going to give me something to aim to with the other side. I don't know how well I'm going to cut this miter because it's a itty bitty tiny little thing, but we'll see if it helps. Still need to see my score mark better than I can. Check that my stone width at that end is right. That looks good. Dun dun dun. Let's cut a miter. How we do. The rest of it is getting a little angular for me. All right, now in theory, if we measure out our final C angle, it will line up nicely with what I just cut.
Nice cut, by the way.
Oh, it's a little iffy in a couple spots. And I actually think that it might have been easier on me. So I mitered this way, this angle. It might have been easier had I mitered this way, and then this runs right into it. But I'm going to have to, in this case, miter both to get myself what I want. But we'll see how that works out for me. I need to first get my stone. And I got a little bit of wonkiness. I keep distorting my longer walls when I'm doing this handling of it. I need to do a little fix up there. Get this nice and straight so that my final cut is as clean as I can make it. Get some nice angles. shape. This is clearly a two-parter for us, gang, but we can get this done today, and then that will be a good stopping point. Okay, so I am going to go based on what fits the stone versus using my measuring devices in this at this point. Get this bent a little bit back out. So it's nice and flat. So what I'm looking for is what fits. And then I'll check it against that measurement to see how close on we were. Original set. Holy cow, gang. Measuring by eye on that final bend puts me at the right size for our original measurement for C. I shouldn't be surprised because mathematically it makes sense that our stone didn't change size on us and the calipers are still set to where they were, but somehow that feels kind of miraculous to me. I'm going to celebrate it for what it is.
Oh, sure.
All right, I'm going to get a better score so that I have a good line to work to. And this gets really, really awkward because we've now got all of our other parts well soldered into their corners. Here's my good score. But this is not a cut to fold. This is a cut through. And this is where I'm going to start looking at where my other cut that I just made lines up with it. And try to cut through straight through to those. Where can I position this that I can both show you guys and get a decent grip on it? If anything, I'm going to cut to the outside of my line just to give myself some filing cleanup room. But I'm trying to get that miter on the other side to match up. I have some filing to do for sure. So if I had nice clean cuts, that would be my shape, but I think I'm a little over on the newest cut. So let's see where we land. Yeah, just a tiny bit of excess, but that's okay. I'd rather have excess at this point and be able to clean up my stuff with files. So I'm going to take a nice barrette file. You know how I love me a good barrette file. And I'm going to get that straight edge a little straighter, keeping the miter that I'm trying for in it. It should be getting us closer and closer to a nice snug fit that we'll be able to solder together. Get both the top and the bottom happy. And then it feels like it may still be a little bit wide just looking at it by eye. It is. We got to take more material away from my corner. Do a little more filing.
What cut is your Barrett file?
Well, remember that my fancy files are ancient and therefore
yeah.
whatever
Yeah,
cut
yeah.
they are is extra fancy. I'm currently using, it looks like, if I can read that number right, a 4.
Okay.
No, a 2 maybe. The number's a little worn. Looks like it's a 2, but it's a velour from 1929, so it's probably a 4 in modern files. I'd rather take more time but get cleaner filing than use a coarser file. Usually I tell you guys use the biggest file you can handle, but in this case it's biggest and most detailed that you can withstand. So I want to be taking away a little bit at a time, consciously. Still looks a little wide. Still a little wide. Just got a chunk to take away. Still got a fair amount of gap over there. Let's see, what am I missing? Just need to take a good chunk. Double check that I'm looking at from the right position. Yes, I do have leeway, so I overcut.
So what side are you filing on now?
The
See,
final
we-
C, the final C where it's
On-
meeting the original B is what I'm trimming down. Because I was
Okay.
cutting at that angle and I missed my line by a little bit. So I made it a little too wide, and that's what I'm taking back down now.
I'm just so thrilled that you're doing this, Rachel. Wow.
I'm gonna be thrilled when we're done, and then I'll feel relief. Because by God, I will not let Emerald Cut be the master of me.
Oh, you can try it 10 times, right?
Yeah, at least.
And then it'll be a
I
piece
have
of cake.
managed to make Emerald Cuts in the past. I just haven't made them consistently.
On a wing and a prayer.
Right. A little off on my straight angle there, so I gotta take a little bit more at the top. And let's see how we straighten everything back out. Okay, it's feeling a little bit more equal to the eye than it was. Here's hoping. I believe, oh, no, there's still a little more to be had. I'm trying to debate whether I should be taking it away from, I think it's that I don't have my walls straight anymore. I keep warping them as I'm gripping it. Whenever I get that little divot in there, it causes challenges further downstream. There's still a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the trick of cutting from the inside through both walls, just like you might if you're doing a ring, because I'm such a tiny little smidge away from being where I want to be I think I want to take it away equally from both edges as I cut. I can get this positioned in such a way that I can actually get that cut. Still feeling too loose to me, guys. I'll turn this upside down. I don't think so. So it's almost as if my corner that I was futzing with has unbent a little bit. Crisp that one up a little bit more. Having too much material here again. Ay, ay, ay. Futsy, futsy, futsy. Have too much material here. No. Do I have too much material? Yes. It's still on that final C corner being a little too wide. Okay, I think this is as close as I'm getting. I think I'm gonna have to do, no, I'm still not happy with that corner, damn it. Yeah, I need a little smidge more still off that one corner. And then I'm gonna solder it come hell or high water. I think this is as happy as I'm gonna get with this one. Zoom in for you guys before I go over to solder this.
Well, Rachel, it looks pretty darn close.
It's pretty close. Yeah, there's a little bit of gapping up here that I think once I straighten things again will be okay. I think they'll close in. Because if I keep going shorter on this one, I'm going to end up with too little on that corner.
You're dark. There's no,
Sorry.
there we, now there is.
So there's if I take more off of this corner, I'm going to end up too short on that C corner. And there's no room to take it out of here. So I think it's just so what happens is as we make, if there's a little more than we should have, it doubles as it gets to the next side, it doubles. Like, so it just sort of pushes the bubble around of where the problem is. And that's what we're hitting. But I think it's going to be close enough that it'll be manageable. So I'm going to make sure that I've got a clean surface to solder. Up top, but the bottom is a little wacky. Let's get a little bit of that extra stuff off of there. Oh, I'm not zoomed out, sorry. Taking the burring And then we're gonna go pop over and see what we get. And then we will call it a day. After I see anything that you guys have been working on, because that's my favorite part. A little fluxing. A little pripsing.
Rachel, remind me, are your chips 1 centimeter or 0.5 centimeters?
Oh, these are the
Millimeter.
little glitter chips that Rio sells. I just
So-
pick up a couple at a time.
But they usually come in 2 different sizes.
Oh, do they? They're itty bitty.
So that probably means they're 1 millimeter, and
No, I'd say they're smaller than 1 millimeter.
maybe it's the 0.5 millimeter one then, huh?
Yeah, maybe. They're sort of rectangular, but they're also not all exactly the same size. Again, for me, chip solder, it just reminds me to not overdo it with my solder. Like if I do wire solder, I have a penchant to put more down than I would if I'm doing chips a little at a time. Which in this case, I do need a little bit more, but not that much.
And you're balling it up anyway.
Yeah, yeah. But I tend to not equate the round material with like there's something about having that thinner sheet, which you can also get by just rolling your solder, of course, but dimensionally I think of a small chip of wire solder as bigger as I don't think of it as bigger when I should, because it's got the round dimension. I'm not saying that very well, but hopefully that made some sense. Little guy, all the way flow. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Okay.
Do the happy dance.
Yeah, we're gonna pop that in the pickle, and we're gonna take a look at it once it's clean enough that you guys can see the flaws and foibles in it. But meanwhile, anybody got anything to show off to me? Anyone? Carmen, you said you had something to show.
I had a question about a ring that I have that you've seen,
Okay.
and for some reason, remember this ring? My
I
cocktail ring,
vaguely recall it, yes, amongst the many.
and I had this smoky.
Yep.
For some reason, it doesn't want to fit anymore.
So, is it trying to fall in, or is it just not sitting well?
Not really.
It's not long enough? Can you point it straight at the screen? No, can you point the ring? Yeah, and put that in and then rotate it to face the camera. Because what I'm trying to see is where is the gapping?
Mm.
Oops, your screen froze for me. I don't know if it did for other people.
You still have it or no?
Yep, now face it towards us. So it looks like it's long wise, it's not fitting, but width wise, it
Right.
kind of is. Is width wise, is it
Yeah.
loose?
I don't know if it was because I opened the prongs.
Yeah, so
And
that's
I-
what I'm guessing. So when you, so I'm betting you have a little bit of extra room on the sides, because when you pull the prongs, it opens your oval. And the only way it can
Yeah.
open the oval is by collapsing the length, right? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go back in there either with half round pliers or possibly with, if you have a the block and the DAP that we use, DAP, that was the word that wasn't coming to me. You can use a DAP that is a little bit about the size of the curve of the end of the stone, and you can sort of push outward on the ends. So what you're trying to do is take your oval and elongate it. And then you can also do a little bit of a pinch outside of each of the uprights, outside of your prongs, to squeeze it together, and do it tiny amounts at a time. And what you'll see is that your oval that is right now shaped like this is going to do that,
Mhm.
and it'll get longer enough and it'll go back into position.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah. That makes sense, because I was gonna heat it up and pound it and see
Nope.
what I
No,
But-
start
okay.
if it's soft enough, you could even just start with some soft, like some rubber coated pliers or something, and just squeeze, pinch from both sides, right on the prongs themselves, right up at where they meet the bezel. Just squeeze a tiny, tiny bit, check your stone, squeeze it, yeah, right there and there, just below the wall, the lip of the, right where the prongs touch the wall, right? Down below your finger, right there, yep. So you're just gonna squeeze with some pliers, one side, flip it around from the other side, so you're squeezing them together, like the tiniest of squeezes, and check your stone, squeeze and check your stone. If that doesn't do it, then you're gonna go in there and reshape the oval at the ends with a steel rod of some kind. Could be one of the DAPs, or it could be a ring sizer or something like that. I mean, a ring mandrel or what have you. Any other
Okay.
questions or showing and telling today? Oops, did my video just go blank? No, it's just my bench cam that went blank on me.
I did a new
Anybody
piece.
else? Say again? New piece?
I
Yay.
did a new piece.
Ooh, another hollow form. I like it.
Another hollow form.
Is that that is a hollow form, right? Your screen is sort of freezing on me.
Yes.
Yay. Ooh, I like it. And I like that you pressed down in and gave that dimensionality to it. Fantastic. Got a beautiful
But
sort
I
of
have that little
rod-like
circle in
shape.
the middle.
Yeah,
I have this little circle here in the middle. I don't know what to do with it.
doesn't
I was
have to do
thinking-
anything, but you could also set an offset tube set diamond in it or something, or, you know, have something that they can hook on and off of it so they can change the look. There's all kinds of stuff. Or it's just an interesting circle. Kiambu the inside, so it's a gold circle. I don't know.
Okay. I kind of did it because I was thinking of setting a stone, but then it's all done and I don't want to mess with it. And then part of me was kind of like, I sort of saw it as like flowy pearls coming down from the middle, but I couldn't visualize it.
Or chains. You could
So
do a
that's my
bunch of
new-
hanging chains hooked onto that and just drape them.
Oh yeah,
like
that's
little fringe.
okay.
But
That's good.
I kind of like it as is. There's something really interesting about a vessel with a space in the middle of it that has a hole. There's something heart-like, vase-like, container-like. I don't know. I like it as
Well,
is.
this was a challenge because it's all brass.
Oh, wow.
It's
Yeah.
all brass.
Hollow forms and brass can be rough. A lot of heat.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anything to show? Okay, let me grab the material out of the pickle and we'll take a last peek at it. And then we know what we're doing next month. Hopefully it'll go a little faster on the interior one. But our exterior one drives the precision that we care about. And do. So let's see if I can remember which side should be up. I think this is it. That's our corner. Yeah, I gotta do a little bit of reshaping, and same thing that you're about to do to your oval, I gotta do a little bit of to get my corners a little bit squared up. Let me see. Oh, I'm still gonna have to file a little bit of solder that's in one of the corners off, and a little solder here, and then I think I'll be able to corner that up. Right now, I don't want to force it because I don't want to chip the corners of the stone, but I'm gonna do a little cleanup on that before we get back together. And then we will build the interior one and hopefully get it set in the next session. Maybe not
Yay.
set. But
Good
yeah,
job. Good job.
holy cow. Emerald cuts still are not my friend. But I'm at
You're
least
getting
maybe
there,
considering
getting
being
there.
I'm being colleagues with them for now. I'm not gonna get that personal loving feeling from them yet. So gang, that sets for our next session being make sure that I am on the right month. October. Where's my window? October 18th. Is our next session. We will finish this. I did not get to clean up our trillion prong setting. I'll try to have that so that we at least get one setting in, even if we don't get all the way through this, because that is a fairly quick stone setting when it's on the prong. And again, last chance is tonight if you want to sign up for the Bezel's Less Ordinary. And otherwise, next class is the clasps class in November, or out in California, beautiful sunny near the beach, California, Long Beach, right outside of LA, is the Holoforms workshop that I'll be doing live and in person. And that one is open for registration, and we're looking for people. We need enough people to make it run. So thank you as always for joining me on this ride.
It
And
was
I'll see you next
fabulous.
time.
It was
Thanks.
fabulous. I really miss you.
I'll see you guys later. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.